For me now, my prayer was just like, save me and Robin. I have this wonderful relationship with her. The pain of this experience has caused much trouble in our own relationship.
For more than a decade, Sister Wives invited viewers into the Brown family's living rooms, kitchens, and confessions. Audiences saw laughter, arguments, and endless claims of unity. But what the cameras didn't show, what producers could never script, was the unraveling that would one day land the Browns in a courtroom. This was not television. This was Brown v. Brown. The courtroom carried no theme music, no edited montages. There were no producers guiding conversations, no cameras capturing staged reconciliations. Instead, there were attorneys with binders, a judge with a gavel, and a jury ready to decide the fate of one of reality television's most famous families. Christine and Janelle sat at the plaintiff's table, their expressions firm, their attorneys prepared to prove what they had whispered for years, that the family pot was a lie, that loyalty was bought with dollars, and that dissent was punished. Across from them sat Cody and Robin, side by side, their unity now less a choice and more a defense. Robin's tissues were already in hand, her face etched with the familiar sorrow viewers had seen countless times on screen. Cody's jaw was tight, his posture unyielding, his glare fixed on the courtroom like a man daring anyone to defy him. Mary, as always, occupied a shadowed space between them, present, but not central, seen, but not heard. The judge opened the proceedings with the ritual words, "This court is now in session." And just like that, years of reality television illusions gave way to something no camera crew could ever capture: the raw truth of a family empire built on secrets. Opening statements clash as the plaintiffs frame the Browns' empire as deception, while the defense insists it was just family life under pressure. The prosecution rose first, buttoning their jacket with deliberate calm. They approached the jury box, not with theatrics, but with confidence born from evidence. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to hear is not a story. It is not a television script. It is not a dramatization for ratings. It is the truth. The Browns told America they were a family built on love, faith, and unity, but the evidence will show something else. Money meant for all was funneled to benefit only a few. Emotional harm was not accidental. It was the result of a system where loyalty was rewarded and dissent was punished. This is not about marriage. This is not about faith. This is about deception. It is about financial impropriety. It is about emotional manipulation. And by the end of this trial, you will see that the empire known as Sister Wives was a facade, a carefully constructed illusion masking betrayal. The words hung heavy in the air. The prosecutor stepped back, their expressions steady. Then the defense rose. Cody's attorney strode toward the jury, voice strong, words sharp. You will hear many things in this courtroom. You will hear about money, about arguments, about personal pain. But let us be clear. Families argue. Families struggle. Families make decisions that not everyone agrees with. The Browns are not criminals. They are not frauds. They are human. What the plaintiffs call betrayal, we call imperfection. What they call deception, we call survival under the crushing pressure of fame. Cody Brown is not a villain. He is a father, a husband, a man who tried and sometimes failed to hold his family together in front of the eyes of millions. Do not let bitterness be mistaken for truth. Do not let resentment be mistaken for evidence. The defense returned to their table, Cody nodding subtly, his arms crossed tight across his chest. Robin clutched a tissue, tears already welling, her gaze lowered but her sobs audible. Christine and Janelle sat motionless, their expressions unflinching. Mary looked down at her hands, detached yet bound to the moment. Two stories had been told. Only one would survive the trial. The first witnesses are called insiders who pull back the curtain on how the Browns' family unity looked when the cameras stopped rolling. The bailiff called the first witness. A hush fell over the courtroom as an insider to the Brown family raised their right hand and swore to tell the truth. The prosecutor began gently. Were you present for discussions regarding the family finances? Yes, the witness replied, their voice steady but cautious. And what did you observe? The witness paused, glancing briefly at Cody before answering. That the money didn't flow equally. The family pot wasn't shared the way people believed. Some decisions were made privately, and not everyone was included. The prosecutor nodded, lifting a binder of bank statements. Are these documents consistent with what you saw? Yes. The words rippled through the courtroom. For Christine and Janelle, it was validation. For Cody, it was confirmation of what he had long denied. For the jury, it was a shift. Speculation was now testimony. The defense rose quickly for cross-examination. Their tone was sharp, clipped. Isn't it true that all families argue about money? Yes. And isn't it possible that what you saw were misunderstandings, not deception? The witness hesitated. It didn't feel like misunderstanding. It felt deliberate. The jury scribbled furiously, pens scratching paper. The weight of that word, deliberate, hung in the air like smoke. Later, another witness took the stand, a professional who had reviewed the Browns' financial records. Their testimony was dry, clinical, but devastating. In my professional opinion, the transfers and accounts show a pattern inconsistent with transparency. It suggests financial impropriety. Cody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Robin dabbed her eyes, her tears no longer carrying the same force they once had. Christine and Janelle sat taller, their strength growing with each revelation. Mary sat in silence, her gaze fixed downward. The first cracks in the Browns' empire were no longer whispers. They were now testimony entered into record, undeniable. The trial digs deeper as witnesses speak to the emotional toll of living in a system where questioning Cody meant punishment and loyalty was currency. The next witness wasn't a financial expert. They weren't an accountant or a bookkeeper. They were a counselor, someone who had sat in the Browns' living rooms, listened to their arguments, and heard what the cameras could never fully capture. The prosecutor's voice was calm but deliberate. In your sessions with the Brown family, what patterns did you observe? There was a consistent imbalance. When Christine voiced loneliness, her feelings were reframed as jealousy. When Janelle raised financial concerns, she was told she was ungrateful. Meanwhile, Robin's emotions were prioritized, validated immediately. This created an environment where some voices mattered and others did not. The jury shifted in their seats. Pens scratched furiously against notepads. And what was the impact of this imbalance? In my professional opinion, the counselor said firmly, it caused emotional harm. It reinforced isolation and mistrust. Over time, it eroded the sense of family unity the Browns claimed to embody. Christine wiped at her eyes, quiet tears slipping free. Janelle sat straighter, her lips pressed into a firm line. Mary remained still, her silence thick and heavy, as if she'd heard these words before and buried them long ago. Across the aisle, Cody's jaw clenched, his arms crossed tightly, his frustration barely contained. Robin sobbed quietly into her tissue, her tears echoing the patterns the counselor described. The defense rose for cross-examination, their tone sharp. Isn't it true that all families have conflicts? Isn't it true that disagreements don't necessarily mean abuse? The counselor didn't waver. Conflict is normal, but the structure of this family was not. The favoritism wasn't occasional, it was systemic. The word hung in the air. Systemic. Not a misunderstanding, not a quirk of family life, a system. And with that testimony, the jury wasn't just hearing about money anymore. They were hearing about scars that didn't show up in bank statements, scars that cut deeper into the emotional heart of the family. Cameras shifted, reporters leaned forward, and even the jury seemed to straighten in their seats. The name carried weight, Mindy Jessup, Robin Brown's nanny. For years, fans had asked, what does the nanny even do? Now, that question was about to be answered in a courtroom. Not in a confessional interview. The prosecutor began softly. Please state your role in the Brown household. Mindy's voice was clear, steady. I worked as a nanny for Cody and Robin Brown. I managed childcare, household tasks, errands. And were you compensated for this role? Yes. My salary was $80,000 per year. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Pens flew across paper. Even members of the jury exchanged glances. Christine and Janelle's attorneys remained composed, but the faintest flicker of vindication crossed their faces. The prosecutor pressed on. During your employment, did you become aware of financial accounts that were not shared with the entire family? Yes, Mindy said, her tone unwavering. There was an LLC. Money was routed through it. Christine and Janelle weren't included. Cody's jaw tightened. Robin's sobs grew louder, her tissue trembling in her hands. Did you ever overhear conversations about the other wives? Yes, Mindy said, pausing only briefly. I heard Cody and Robin talk about making sure their household was financially secure. They said Christine and Janelle had to make do. The courtroom buzzed, the gavel struck. Order, the judge commanded, but the damage was done. The defense rose for cross-examination, their voice sharp. Isn't it true that you were paid fairly? That you were not directly involved in financial decisions? Mindy nodded. I was paid, but I saw what I saw. I heard what I heard. I was there when the cameras weren't. The silence that followed was deafening. For years, the nanny had been little more than a whispered question mark in the sister-wives story. In court, she became the voice that cut through the noise, her testimony shifting the jury's perception in ways no accountant or counselor ever could. Christine's eyes glistened, her vindication silent but powerful. Janelle leaned back, arms folded, her composure steady as stone. Mary stared downward, her silence aching. And Cody, the patriarch, the leader, the man who once demanded loyalty, sat exposed. The bailiff wheeled in a cart stacked with binders, each one thick with tabs and marked evidence labels. The jury shifted, their eyes following every movement. This wasn't speculation anymore, this was proof. The prosecutor lifted the first binder. Your Honor, the state submits exhibits A through F. The judge nodded. So admitted. Exhibit A bank transfers screens, projected on the courtroom wall, showed line after line, money pulled from the family pot and deposited into accounts bearing only Cody and Robin's names. Dates circled, amounts highlighted, a pattern stretching years. Exhibit B tax filings. The LLC Mindy had mentioned. Quietly registered, quietly operated. A funnel for funds the other wives never saw. Exhibit C handwritten checks, vacations, jewelry, tuition for private schools, thousands spent, while Christine and Janelle were told there was nothing left. Exhibit D meeting notes, in Cody's handwriting, loyalty equals security. No loyalty equals no support. But the words were already burned into memory. Christine stared at the screen, her lips trembling, her eyes filling with tears. Janelle leaned forward, scanning every page with the sharp gaze of someone who had asked these questions for years. Mary lowered her head, her silence echoing louder than any protest. Across the aisle, Cody's face turned pale, his confidence crumbling. Robin's sobs filled the space, her tissues now a small mountain in her lap. The prosecutor's voice carried like steel. These are not rumors. These are not stories. These are receipts, documents, records. And they show a family empire built not on unity but on deception. The jury scribbled furiously, their pens scratching paper in unison. The evidence wasn't just supporting the testimony, it was sealing it. Receipts don't lie, they endure, they expose. And for the Browns, they destroyed the illusion forever. The voices of the children rise, their testimony giving the jury a glimpse into what it felt like to grow up inside the Browns' fractured empire. The bailiff called the next witness, and the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't another accountant, counselor, or nanny. It was one of the Browns' own adult children. The young woman raised her right hand, swore to tell the truth, and took her seat at the witness stand. The jury leaned in, the gallery stilled. The prosecutor began gently. Can you describe what it was like growing up in the Brown household? The witness drew a breath. We were told it was all about family, about unity, but it didn't feel that way. Some moms had support, others didn't. We could see the difference even as kids. And we learned early that if you agreed with Dad, life was easier. If you didn't, you got left out. The courtroom murmured. The judge raised a hand. Order, the prosecutor pressed further. Did you notice differences in financial support? Yes, my mom was told there was no money for school for activities, but then we'd hear about new things for Robin's kids. Trips, vacations, private lessons we noticed. We just weren't allowed to talk about it. Christine's eyes welled, her attorney placing a hand on her arm. Janelle nodded slightly, her lips pressed tight. Mary sat still, her face unreadable, as though hearing truths she had long known but never spoken. The defense rose for cross-examination, their tone sharp. Isn't it true your family lived under the pressures of fame? Isn't it possible that what you saw was misinterpreted? The child's voice cracked but held steady. We knew what was happening. Loyalty mattered more than honesty. Love felt conditional. The jury scribbled, their pens racing. The air felt heavier than it had with any prior testimony. Another child testified later that day. Their words echoed the same pain: favoritism, neglect, conditional love. What the documents proved on paper, the children proved in feeling. The tears, the silence, the imbalance. For years, fans asked, what do the kids really think? In court, the answer was devastatingly clear. The attorneys deliver their closing arguments, final words that frame the Browns' legacy before the jury makes its decision. The judge's gavel struck. We will now hear closing statements. The prosecution rose first. Their steps were measured, their voice steady but heavy with conviction. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've seen the records. You've heard the witnesses. You've listened to the children. This is not about faith. This is not about polygamy. This is about deception. The Browns told the world they were united, but the evidence shows they were divided. Money meant for everyone was hidden. Support was conditional. Emotional harm was inflicted. Christine and Janelle were dismissed for years. Today, their truth has been confirmed. The Browns' empire wasn't built on sacrifice. It was built on favoritism and control. You hold the power to decide whether that deception becomes their legacy or whether truth finally takes its place. The words lingered. The prosecutor sat down, Christine and Janelle steady at their side. Then the defense rose. Cody's attorney walked to the jury box, voice louder, sharper, almost pleading. What you've heard here are stories colored by resentment. Families fight, families struggle, mistakes happen. But mistakes are not fraud, imperfections are not crimes. Cody Brown is not a villain. He is a husband, a father, a man who gave everything to hold his family together while the world watched. The plaintiffs want you to see betrayal. We ask you to see humanity. The defense gestured toward Christine and Janelle, then toward Cody and Robin. This is not fraud. This is family. The jury remained still, pens down, their expressions unreadable. Christine's attorney rose briefly for rebuttal, their words sharp and precise. Family is built on trust. Trust was broken. That is the truth. And with that, the trial was in the jury's hands. The judge dismissed them to deliberate, his voice echoing through the chamber. You may now begin your deliberations. The Browns sat frozen in place, each knowing that the next words spoken in this courtroom would redefine their lives. The jury deliberates. Hours stretch into silence as the Browns wait for the verdict that will rewrite their legacy. The jury filed out of the courtroom, their notes in hand, the heavy doors closing behind them with a dull thud. For a moment, the silence inside was deafening. The trial was over. Whatever the jury decided, she knew her truth had been spoken. Still, the weight of the moment pressed down. Janelle leaned back slightly, her arms folded. Her calm demeanor masked years of frustration, years of questions met with dismissals. The jury's answer mattered, but her resolve had been decided long ago. Mary sat apart, her gaze fixed downward. She scrolled her phone quietly, reading headlines as they appeared in real time. Her silence remained her armor, though it also isolated her. Across the aisle, Cody paced in small, sharp circles. His jaw clenched, his face flushed with agitation. His attorney tried to calm him, whispering reassurances, but his frustration was too raw. Robin sat beside him, tissues crushed in her fist, her sobs quiet but constant, hers passed. Reporters outside speculated, typing stories half-written, waiting to add the outcome. Social media buzzed with theories. Would the jury take days? Would they split? But the answer came faster than anyone expected. After only a handful of hours, the bailiff re-entered the courtroom. The whisper spread instantly. The jury has reached a decision. Everyone stood as the jurors filed back in, their expressions solemn, their eyes cast down. The foreperson clutched a folded piece of paper, the verdict form. The judge's voice cut through the tension. Members of the jury, have you reached a unanimous verdict? Yes, Your Honor. The words tightened every chest in the room. Christine and Janelle leaned forward slightly, their eyes locked on the foreperson. Cody froze in place, his fists curled on the table. Robin's sobs grew sharper. Mary remained still, her silence louder than any sound. The paper was handed to the judge. He unfolded it carefully, his face neutral, his voice steady. In the matter of Brown versus Brown, The room stopped breathing. The verdict is read, and with it, the Browns' empire collapses into silence, forever rewriting their legacy. The judge unfolded the paper, his voice calm, measured, and final. In the matter of Brown versus Brown, every eye locked forward. The gallery leaned in, reporters poised their pens, the Browns themselves froze in place. The jury finds in favor of the plaintiffs. Gasps broke through the silence. Reporters scrambled, cameras clicked, pens scratched furiously. The gavel struck, demanding order, but the verdict had already detonated like thunder. The judge continued. We find that financial impropriety did occur, we find that emotional harm was inflicted, and we find that the allegations brought by Christine Brown and Janelle Brown are substantiated. Christine closed her eyes, her lips trembling as she let out a breath she had been holding for years. Janelle exhaled slowly, her face calm but triumphant. Their attorneys exchanged satisfied nods. Mary sat still, her gaze down, her silence unchanged. She neither celebrated nor wept, her absence within the moment louder than any words. Across the aisle, Cody slumped back, his face pale, his fists unclenching at last. The patriarch who once demanded loyalty now looked hollow, a man stripped of power. Robin buried her face in tissues, her sobs raw and unrelenting. The judge set the paper down. Not the silence of peace, but of exposure. The silence that follows when truth is no longer deniable. Outside, headlines exploded. Brown v. Brown verdict shatters family empire. Sister wives' legacy ends in courtroom. From TLC fame to real-life judgment. But inside, the Browns knew the truth. Their story had been rewritten forever. From reality television to real court. The case of Brown v. Brown was no longer entertainment, it was history, and history had spoken.